Hi everyone, Bandana here. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone who celebrated had a good Easter. Otherwise, I hope you just had a good weekend. So, the plan is today we're going to go over the environment of hunger. So that's things like the dungeons, the shops, this, that and the other, and just general environments as well. Now, again, split it into sections. Good news is we should be getting gameplay on the 25th, it looks like, so keep your eyes peeled for that. They have also released a prologue PDF, which is like a story leading into the whole situation of the game. I'm debating whether I do like a podcasty type video reading that out. We'll see. It is quite long, but it's well worth a read, I think. If that's something you would like to see, let me know in the comments. Anyhow, let's get into today's video. So let's start with the Abbot Dungeon. This is like the proper dungeon. Now, my understanding is that enemies can technically follow you in here and could potentially also camp the exit. So it'll be interesting to see how this is handled when the game comes out. So this one is called the Abbot Dungeon. General suggestion is to use this dungeon as part of a secret underground passages used by the religious orders. Thus, they say if they have the hunger in there, it would logically be either naked ones or mostly basic peasant outfits, or the monks, Shambler monk outfit, they put in brackets there. But not soldiers or posh aristocrats. Destructible pick covers, traps can enrich the overall experience and push players to do balanced party by having at least one rogue type of character to spot the traps and open doors and things like that. Regarding the locked chambers, I would suggest finding some keys spawning randomly across the dungeon, coffins, stashes perhaps, or outside of the dungeon as a quest-like item. But generally, when the party leaves the dungeon, there might be some chambers left unopened, as there are less keys than chambers available, so players have to guess if they need to spend the key now, or keep it for a further locked chamber in the deeper levels. So, interesting. Maybe that allows for other people to come in behind and unlock stuff? How that will affect the game flow for the dungeons, I'm not sure. We'll have to see. But obviously you can loop back on yourself, as you can see on some of the images here. So as you can see, there's an entrance through a brute cave, so I assume there's going to be a brute protecting it. Then the first level is coffin rooms and prayer chambers, and obviously you can see the purple locked chambers there as well. Then you've got a second area, which is like a long cave-like natural shaft with lots of broken bridges, jump checks / traps. So there's an interesting one. The game's going to have jumping, and it's going to involve jumping over gaps and things that you know otherwise you'd fall and die. And then there's a concealed way through to a secret room with good loot and traps, and another way down to the next area. Then you've got a spacious cave with waterfalls, vertical columns or stalagmites. Good place for fighting other parties. Also, the first children statues are seen here with candles lit in their chest area. So there's creepy children statues in this place. We'll get on to that because I've got some images of what they might look like. But that's like one of the areas where these other players could fight with you. So it is sort of intended here that other people will be able to follow you in and have a fight. But how that plays in the final version of the game or when we get to play it, I don't know. Maybe there'll need to be limitations on that. Because I guess you could get ambushed while you're in the boss chamber, which would be unpleasant after fighting your way through a dungeon. It's not quite like Hunt, because the boss chamber you just kind of run in and you're there, whereas here you're going to have to fight your way to it. Anyhow, then you'll go on to an area with more statues and candles leading towards the Abbot Crypt. Then there'll be a concealed room, and it's your last chance to pick up something useful before meeting the Abbot. And then you'll go into the Abbot Crypt. It's supposed to be big, spacious, vertical, with a huge cross in the ceiling and letting in natural light. And that'll have a metal grate across it. And again, it raises questions. Could you stand on the surface and shoot down at the people fighting the Abbot? So there's all these things to consider. So I wonder how they're going to handle all of that. Anyhow, let's move on, because we've got some more detailed looks at all of these. So this is just a side shot of the same thing. We can move on from that. Here is that first area. So once you come into the entrance, you've got various different chambers, and obviously the purple closed or locked chambers. And you can see all of the imagery of kind of where they've been and taken pictures or got pictures online, etc., to give them ideas of what they will have in these crypts. I'm assuming a lot of this is just taken from online, but it's possible they've been out and taken some actual pictures in their local areas. Obviously, lots of candles. So anyhow, let's have a look. So you've got the entrance here. So a descending tunnel carved in the stone, having a rough stone-like tiles along the walkway and some openings on the right, letting light in with closed metal grids to stop players trying to get there. Okay. Then you've got 2 chambers connected with very narrow passage, giving a chance for flanking an enemy or escape the hunger. So, you know, various ways to maneuver around these. There's some interconnected bits, there's some other tunnels moving around. So level 1 is several roughly carved corridors leading to monk cells and burial chambers, having lootable coffins, mummified bodies, niches in the walls, engraved with some anti-theft cages. This will require a lockpick or an ability check. And then you've got the purple rooms, which are just locked at the door, and again you will need a lockpick or an ability check. And then you've got a chamber over here that's got a hole in the floor, letting the player get into the corridor below, works for flanking or escape. Then there's level 1.5 and 2. So the main level 2 area is this vertical, spacious, natural cave system with a shaft having stalagmites at the central part, serving as support for the destroyed bridges. And then there's a narrow pathway which leads down along the shaft wall, having some sections broken. That'll be where you have to jump down. Obviously getting back that way will be more difficult, but they say you will be able to go back that way. So we'll see how that pans out. And then light is coming from a cross-shaped openings far above, so you'll have some natural light coming in. And then over here, they're talking about sort of a secondary way through, so that they're going to have like a prayer altar is kind of POI serving as an exploration piece where the player can, you know, get occasional loot and look down over the area that they're stood above, you know, big platform basically. And then there'll be a side bit that goes into this secret area, which is a second way through with lots of loot and rare loot in, so you'll have to get in there. And then there's going to be locked rooms within that as well. And that'll also be another way down to the bottom. Then you've got what they're calling level 3, which is this open area where they think it would be good for an ambush or a fight with other players. And you can see these creepy childlike dolls or statues. They've got some little examples on the right there. And they're talking about starting to have these appear. And there'll be a lot in the Abbot chamber when we get there. But you can see a sort of much more natural look to what they're going for here, rather than, you know, being carved out by the monks. Then you've got the Abbot crypt. So again, you've got that room down here that's just a concealed room before the crypt that you can go in and get loot out of. Again, it looks like they're going to have jumping in and out of here to get in there. And then the Abbot crypt, they say here, is a big spacious room having a main area in the center and several sub areas in the corners separated by columns or ruins. The main light source is the huge cross at the top, which is covered with a grid, you know, to stop them getting in by the surface. It gives players the understanding that there is something underneath, so they can get down there. The rest of the light is provided by candles as well as fake lighting through windows high above. The place is full of ruins, cobwebs, as well as lots of children's dolls made by the Abbot. The dolls are interactable, so the player can blow out the candle, and among the dolls, there will be 3 very precious ones to the Abbot. If you find them and blow out the candles, then the Abbot gets a debuff for speed and range attacks or similar. So interacting with the environment has an effect on the bosses here, at least this one. And just to let people get out of the dungeon quickly, they've got like an elevator, which will only become accessible once the Abbot is defeated and can only be opened at the top from the inside. Obviously, there's the whole, you know, could it be camped, etc., etc. Yes, so they're talking about getting out another way as well. Lots of questions remain there, I think. Sort of how difficult it'll be to get out if it's camping. I mean, one of the things that Hunt does very well is there are multiple entrances and exits to the boss buildings, whereas here you're talking about potentially 2, so one there, and then one that's sort of here, and they're going to be pretty close together in that case. So they might have a look at how they're dealing with that. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to get out without getting shot to pieces. But there you go, that's everything for that dungeon. Let's have a look at some of the other areas you will encounter. So that was the big dungeon, and we will probably go through everything else a lot quicker now, but I wanted to spend some time going through that because I felt it was important. So this is another environment that you will come across with lots of different buildings and things. This is the fishing camp. It's an example of one of the points of interest that you will encounter where there's lots of stuff going on. So it's going to have entrances and fences around it, various trade carts and stalls. These are tents here, all of these green icons. Then there's fish traps down there. You've got piers, boats, sort of dead trees and nets and everything with very shallow water, so you'll have to run through all that. And I assume it'll be full of enemies as well. But looks like there'll be a few ways in, and I'm assuming it's going to be somewhere you'll get various bits of loot. Beyond that, the other pictures are just sort of breaking it down a bit more. But shallow water is where the player is able to walk and loot things, fish traps, bodies, boats, or gather resources, weeds, reeds, and fish. Speed of movement is reduced by 25%. The sound of footsteps or splashes increased to plus 30%. Areas outside shallow water are inaccessible. So basically, there's going to be a reason to go there because you need to craft things in the game and make food and everything else because you have to eat and drink. So, you know, it'll be a good place to perhaps catch someone off guard while they're looting stuff, which seems a bit cruel, but that is the nature of these games, I guess. But there's nothing else to that one other than just a few examples of the piers and things that they're looking at, and sort of broken up boats and stuff that'll be littered around and you might find some loot in. And the dead trees and things, again, just provide cover so you can hide behind them if you are caught out. Various nets and things which will cause an entangled debuff which reduces the speed of movement by 80%, yet let the player pass through. Can spawn randomly, affecting both living and AI, and may be used for achieving tactical advantage in combat. So I like the fact they've got this stuff in there. I mean, I know there's water in Hunt, for example, but it's nice that there's other things that aren't necessarily going to damage you, but are going to slow you down. The only thing that comes to mind like that in Hunt, really, is barbed wire, which obviously damages you as well, but it does slow you down a lot. Various fish traps and stuff, which I guess you might find fish in to make food with, and similar things again, various nets and tents and stuff, and then various ideas for the trading area with stalls and stuff. Again, it's going to be full of rotten stuff, but there might be some lootable things that aren't rotten, wallets, chests, etc., etc. So, good amount of variety. In the centre of the trading area stands St. Andrew's wooden statue, as he was the patron saint of fishermen, and the statue may be covered with some blood and or decorated with fish, giving it a bit of a pagan taste, and have a linked quest, as young girls used to pray to him for successful marriage, so maybe used as a landmark or a way to get a non-obvious achievement, etc., etc., etc. I do like that idea there that you drop a couple of fish into the radius and then you get an achievement for that. Silly little things, but fun, just little additions. Now, this next point of interest is more of a standard building, I think. This is a lumber mill. As you can see here, it's sort of semi-modelled in-game already. This is a 3D model, obviously. You can see there's attics, an officer's part is connected with a central one through the broken wall, bits and pieces, sort of description of how it's going to work. Mill officers and head's living room. And you've got the sewing room in blue. You've got a corridor across there. Tower storage ladders, workshops and storage. Very reminiscent of sort of things you might find in Hunt Showdown and sort of from that era. There it is again, a better shot without the colours. You can see there's plenty of windows to shoot out of, plenty of cover. I mean, there's going to be plenty of room to move around in there. That's the other side, obviously. You've got the water wheel and everything. And you've got some examples of the types of buildings that they've used as reference. Very reminiscent of some of the stuff we have in Hunt Showdown. Then we've got, again, just some of the inside buildings there. You can see a screenshot from the game there where the guy stood in. But again, examples of where they're getting this stuff from. And that's everything for the lumber mill. Nice and straightforward. Then next up is another dungeon of sorts. I think this is a smaller dungeon / POI. This one is called the Watchtower. As you can see here, it is a watchtower with a nice wall around it, so very military style. It's got a chapel, armors and gunpowder over there, prisoner pit, barracks, and a kitchen and storage area, and some examples of what that would look like. If we move along, you can see here there's going to be sort of... I think the intention here is that this will be an underground bit, so there's ways into the dungeons underneath, and you'll have various cells and rooms and things, and ways through the broken walls. They're talking about having a bell sound trap there, so I guess, you know, going through certain doors will set off the alarm or the bell, which again, you get bells in Hunt Showdown, but none of them are traps per se. They're all ones that you ring yourself. And there's everything sort of layered on top of each other. I'm not sure what the green... I assume the green bits are paths through, or ways you can traverse between areas. That's, again, just an example of what the chapel might look like in the walls. Then an example of what the barracks would look like inside. Armors and gunpowder room. I wonder if that entire thing goes kablooey. And then you've got the prisoner pit, which is literally just a pit to throw a prisoner in, with a few different examples. And then there's sort of a concept of what the surface might look like other than the standard buildings. So, you know, maybe you've just got huts and a religious bit and a fire pit and somewhere to eat and some shelters, etc., etc. And obviously a stock / somewhere to hang people, or, you know, all that kind of jazz. Oh, and then over in the far corner, you have a dung pile or a toilet. I mean, yeah, these places had stuff like that, so no surprise there. At least they're being detailed about it. And that is everything, again, for the Watchtower. But again, another little mini dungeon, perhaps. Okay, so next I thought it might be fun to go through what is effectively either shops or your crafting areas. So this is the Artificer, which I assume is in the chateau and is either a shop or where you can go and work. And obviously this is someone who is experienced or a trader in making other crafting tools. So they design stuff to craft other stuff. And obviously that'll be quite important if you're making potions or food or whatever else, weapons, it doesn't matter. You will have to come here and get the basic tool sets. I guess this is where you'll also get things like the repair kits for armor. And again, you've got another shot of what that looks like on the desk there, and some examples of where they've pulled all of these ideas from and then implemented them in the game. And obviously some of it is almost identical. It's really well done. There's a lot of detail in there. Okay, next one, gunsmith. Obviously quite an important one in this game, as it would be in Hunt Showdown. You've got various bits and pieces there. Obviously a workbench. I'm assuming somewhere in there, this bottom corner is maybe a fire pit for heating things up. I'm not 100% on that. Various chests and things. A target. It's a funny place to have a target, but I guess you might test a pistol in there. But yeah, various racks for the weapons and everything else. And then we've got a cooking area, and again, will this be where you go and cook? Is it where there is just a cooking vendor? This is quite a nice setup. You've got all the ovens there, obviously coal-fired or wood-fired ovens, somewhere to sit and eat or prepare stuff. Lots of sort of pantry space in the corner. Again, a really nice design, a lot of attention to detail. And if we click on this, there you go, you can see it all. If anyone lives in the UK, I don't know if you've ever been to Beamish Open Air Museum. I know there are ones in various countries. I think I've been to one in Germany, but you'll have seen stuff like this there, I'm sure, and in various museums as well. But as you can see from these, lots of attention to detail, lots of little utensils and things like that they've recreated. I think they've done a really good job. Okay, next up is the metallurgist, so basically a smith. Don't know why we don't just call it a smith. It is effectively a smith, right? So you've got all the heating gear, all the fire pits, you've got various anvils and things, Again, I don't know if this is going to be a shop or somewhere you can go and work yourself, or a mixture of both. I imagine there'll be an element of both. And there's a little bit more detail, the types of things you see there. Anyone who's been playing Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 will be familiar with some of this stuff, I'm sure. If you've done any of the blacksmithing in there. Lots of attention to detail. Again, zooming in on the workbench there. Loads of different clamps and everything else. And vices, really. And then we've got an outfitter who is going to be doing your armor, I guess, and any other clothing, because they've got lots of cloth on the shelf. Well, it's kind of a shelf, it's more like a bunch of cubby holes over here, isn't it? But yeah. And again, you can see there where they're getting their ideas from. Dummies to dress up, and examples of cutouts and things like that are hanging up. And obviously they'll make both metal armor and cloth armor. Again, on that workbench, loads of attention to detail. Look at all the detail on those scissors and the different sizes. Yeah, very impressive. Next up, the physician. Obviously very important, and this is obviously an oldie worldy physician, so you've got a greenhouse in there. It's a funny place for a greenhouse because it looks like it's inside, though there is some natural light, so I'm guessing it's going to be like on the edge of the chateau where some light gets in, I'm guessing. Obviously various drying areas for petals and flowers, etc, etc, and herbs. Some jars with various things in. Let's not go there. Lots of plants, lots of growing, and then a bench for making everything, which we can have a little bit more of a detailed look at. Again, pulling in lots of elements from these images and things and recreating them in game. It does look really good. And that is everything that we have so far from these shops. Let's have a look at the environment in general, and that'll include some other points of interest and things like that. So I'll name this section camps because it's, well, about a certain type of camp. So these are called the Partakers Camp assets. Obviously, the intention being that they will be filled with AI or hunger, whatever you want to call them, the enemies. These appear to be the other side of the religious stuff. So you've kind of got the Catholicism or Christianity type stuff, and then you've got all of these skulls and everything else, and I think this is kind of their side of it. As you've got these bone totems hung up and lots of blood everywhere, and tents and things like that. If we have a look along, you can see there's religious theming in there, because like their fire pit is a cross, right? But then there's lots of skulls and body parts and spines around the place, so it's kind of taken a dark twist, and one assumes maybe they're actually eating people here. So, you know, we're talking a bit messed up. I need to read the entirety of the prequel, and as I say, I'll probably make a video out of it, so it can be like a podcast, just because I'm wondering if it's going to reference this stuff in there, because they've got this image here with Jesus the Feeder, and obviously there's some kind of reference there to everything else, so that's going to be something messed up, I can tell that right now. Okay, next up we've got some crude wood carvings, you've got people pinned to a cross, obviously again you've got the knives and forks. This whole hunger thing obviously is going to be relating to eating people, I think. Again, I need to read the prologue through in full and see what that's all about. I had a glance through the first page, but I didn't get a chance to read it over the weekend. Too busy with family things over Easter. Anyhow, let's move on. So in the previous video, you remember I talked about there was a well with a bucket and everything, but we were looking at the boxes behind that. Well, here is what that well is. A nice well that may appear almost everywhere on the ground level, both in populated and remote areas. It will require 2 people to use. The first player turns the handle with the hold button, while the second player loots the bucket, may have a money stash, note, or jewelry, etc. So if you're a solo, you're going to struggle with that one. Then we have an example of a messenger or a postman or a courier. So there'll be a couple of different versions of dead postmen or couriers having pigeon cages with lootable boxes on their backs. The boxes may contain letters, lore, treasure maps, or a bit more advanced interaction. Player opens the cage, sees a pigeon. In 2 seconds, the pigeon flies away unless the player manages to kill it. If success, the pigeon becomes a lootable container. having all the stuff mentioned above. So that's quite cool as well. You know, you have to shoot the pigeon out of the sky. I don't suppose you're going to be able to stab it with a sword, but, you know, guns and I assume bows and arrows will be available for this task. Then we've got an improvised shooting range that can be found at backyards or bogs or remote forest areas. On the tree stumps, there'll be some ammo or simple firearms such as a snub or similar, and then obviously various dead zombies as target practice. Then we've got a heavily armoured wheeled iron box which can be found at remote roads, bogs, prisons, etc. It requires a lockpick or an ability to open. When open, there are several different options. It can be empty, a couple of gold coins on the floor, a nice safe box having rare items, money or jewellery, a dead body of an unlucky thief who accidentally locked himself in there. You can pick up the lockpick from his body as well. Or a brute will pop out who attacks the player once the door is opened. So, obviously, risk involved here, but potentially, you know, a lot of reward in these as well. Okay, then you'll get a heavy cannon that's been abandoned in the bog, the forest, the basement, the battlefield, having its barrel plugged, turning it into a container with lootable item inside. So you'll open it from the back, I guess. It may require some kind of lockpick to open. Then there will be an abandoned wheeled music box that can be found on roads, cemeteries or bogs. A player has to hold the button and rotate the handle for 30 seconds. The dolls on the top are dancing and circling around the death, or around death even. Oh, it says the death. The box is playing a monophonic melody, attracting hunger as well as other players. When the melody is almost over, there are several last chords that sound different. The box opens and it can be empty. The box opens and has rare loot. The box does burning match sound for 2 seconds. After that, it explodes, dealing significant damage. If a player stops turning the handle, the whole sequence resets. Okay. There's your dancing dolls on top. That's pretty creepy. And obviously there's a risk that it explodes. So, penalties again versus reward. An abandoned wheeled tank cart next to dead horses, having a sort of Monsieur Paradis Marvelous Liquids logo on the side. It requires 2 people to collaborate. One keeps the valve open, the second uses a pump to distill a portion of the liquid as loot. It may contain a number of liquid resources, spirits, oil, flammable components, healing liquids, etc. On the opposite side of the ladder, which can be used when a player is using the cart as cover, also possible to make the tank explosive if we want to. Okay, so it could just, you could blow it up and kill anyone that's near it. Very, very Hunt-esque. Okay, and then we've got some very basic concept art, which is just of various basic rooms that will be in other points of interest. So storage rooms, a poor house living area, sort of an area outside a fortification. It's a refugee camp, so there'll be various tents and things. Then you've got sort of a second floor bedroom in one of these buildings. Second floor small room / where the stairs are, sort of your hallway or landing. Second story storage room with a ladder and everything into the ceiling. Another small storage room with a ladder going down. And that's everything. There's not a lot of those. Obviously very basic concept art, just line drawings. And then next up we've got your sort of standard environment. So there's going to be different times of day, obviously. So this is a nighttime scene of, I assume, a logging camp. So we can see lots of wood logs there, or felled trees, some fencing and everything else. You can see it's sort of a little bit foggy, but daytime. And then we can see it sort of early morning with the sun coming up, I think that is, rather than sort of evening time. Again, forest here. Maybe another look from that same area, just from another side, because we can still see some logs laying down. It's like a forestry camp. A nice bridge here going over a ravine. No water in this one. You can see a turned over wagon there under the bridge as well. Bridge very reminiscent of things we have in Hunt Showdown, obviously, but a lot of verticality to this map. Then we've got just an inner area, a courtyard, a zombie or a person hanging there as well. Obviously, it's quite brutal, this game. It's not, pulling any punches when it comes to this stuff. But I like the stonework, and it looks very real, at least in this light. Again, nice area, bit of greenery, countryside. I like the fact the trees are sort of got orange leaves and everything, so you're talking autumn. I think that's quite nice. Another shot, slightly darker and dingier there. But again, very nice looking environment. Very different to what we have in Hunt Showdown. I think that's nice. It would be a shame if this was just a carbon copy of the types of environments in Hunt Showdown. And again, there, look at that beautiful stone bridge. That is beautiful. I'm just admiring the architecture. I apologize. That is a very nice picture. I haven't had a proper look at these ones yet. That's really nice. Obviously some boats and boxes and maybe some lootable stuff there. Again, a bit like what you'd find in Tarkov, I guess, next to the water. Oh, some chests here. Look at that. What's that? 4 chests sort of stuck in the mud. So I guess they're going to be lootable, but you're in a vulnerable position down in a little valley. No, there's 5 chests. 2 on the right, 1 in the middle, and then 2 on the left. There's one a bit further back that I missed. Okay, that's interesting. So they've obviously washed down there at some point. That's pretty cool. And that is everything. So that's all the environmental stuff they've given us so far, environments, buildings, and everything else. I'm assuming we'll get to see a lot more of this when we see the gameplay, and we can do a little breakdown of that gameplay trailer when it hits. As I say, that should be coming on the 25th if they stick to their timetable. But I'm really liking the design aesthetic of this game so far and the ideas behind it. I can't wait to see more of it and hopefully get my hands on it to give it a little go and see how it plays. But thank you for joining me. Please do, as ever, like, share, subscribe to stay tuned for the latest news on Hunger. And obviously let me know in the comments if you're interested in sort of a podcast of me reading through the whole prologue of the story so you can just listen to it rather than have to sit and read it. I'll see you all soon.